All right, hello everyone. Welcome to today's panel discussion on diversity and inclusion and research and the workforce. My name is Dr. Hammond Pierce. I'm a postdoc here at New York University Tandon's Center for Cybersecurity, and I'm one of the organizers of this event. First, I'd like to acknowledge our sponsors, the National Science Foundation, and also the NYU Center for Cybersecurity, who make these kind of events possible. I'm just going to have a quick introduction today. This is the third webinar in our Manufacturing Cybersecurity Research Series hosted by NYU Tandon. And today the topic is on culture and inclusion. And for this, we are extremely excited to welcome our host, Heba Mahmood, who's the Senior Manager of Inclusion and Diversity at MITRE Corporation. In her role, she's responsible for designing, leading, executing, and integrating strategic, enterprise-wide inclusion and diversity initiatives, practices, and processes that cultivate an inclusive culture and reinforces a sense of belonging. As a mission-driven professional, Heba has spent the last 17 years working with membership associations to create inclusive, diverse, and equitable professional sectors that welcome and engage underrepresented communities. Heba holds an MBA in Business Management from Strayer University and a Bachelor of International Business and Marketing from Howard University. Today, Heba is going to be leading the panel as opposed to our other webinars where I was the moderator. As with our other panels though, attendees can ask questions at any time using Zoom's Q&A ability, and Heba will take those questions and pass them on to the panel during the discussion. So Heba, feel free to take over now.
Thanks, Hammond. And you're a tough act to follow, so thank you for allowing me the opportunity to moderate this session. Thank you everyone for joining us. As Hammond said, my name is Heba Mahmood, and I'm Senior Manager of Inclusion and Diversity at MITRE. MITRE is a not-for-profit organization working in the public interest across federal, state, and local governments, as well as industry and academia. At MITRE, we operate an FFRDC, which is a federally funded research and development center, which are unique organizations that assist the US government with scientific research and analysis, development, acquisition, and systems in engineering and integration. So I'd briefly like to introduce our esteemed panel today before I hand it over to them to give us a little bit more information on their background. So we have Fidelis Gang, who is Professor and Chair of Computer Systems, Networking, Telecommunications, and Artificial Intelligence at Houston Community College. AJ Jorgensen is Vice President of Strategic Engagement at the Manufacturing Institute, which is a workforce development and education partner of the National Association of Manufacturers. And also Lori Williams, who's a distinguished university professor in the Computer Science Department of the College of Engineering at North Carolina State University. Lori is co-director of the NCSU Secure Computing Institute and the NCSU Science of Security Lablet. She is also the Chief Cybersecurity Technologist of the Secure America Institute. Before I hand it over to each panelist to share a little bit more about their background and how they're engaging on diversity and inclusion in their work, I've asked each panelist to either create a slide or share a little bit about a hobby that they've picked up during the pandemic. And so before they share theirs, I'll quickly share my slide with you all as well. And I just want to be really frank in saying I did not pick up a lot of hobbies. I was just trying to stay sane. So that may have been the hobby that I picked up. But one of the things I did do during this pandemic is, here we go. Let me just share this. Great. Can everybody see my slide? Thumbs up. Cool.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. So what I did, I've always been a fan of traveling. I've always wanted to travel around the world in any work that I do. And to be honest with you, I got so sidetracked with work that I never really did get to travel the world. And so I'm like, I have some time on my hands with this pandemic. I'm not going anywhere. So let me plan my future trips. And so what I did during the pandemic was planned one trip per year for my son and I for the next 4 years. Starting this year, we're going to Jamaica later this year. In 2022, we're going to go to Ghana, which I'm really super duper excited about. I'm from East Africa, so it'll be really great to go to the west side of Africa and see what's there. And then 2023, Greece is on my list. I was actually born in Greece and lived there 2 years with my parents. So for my 40th birthday, the whole family is going to go back to Greece. So that should be a good trip down memory lane. And then 2024, and this is my son's doing, we're planning a trip to Japan. A couple of years ago when he was in 4th grade, he had to write a persuasive essay. And in that essay, he wrote why we should go to Japan. And he outlined a great theory and he has it all planned out. And so this is his doing. We're going to Japan in 2024. So that is the hobby that I took up during the pandemic. I'm crossing my fingers, my toes, everything to hope that this goes through. All right, so with that, let me turn it over to Lori.
All right, let me get my slide, share my slide. Hold on one second. All right, so a couple things in my slide. I wanted to tell you a little bit more about myself first. So my primary research area is software security, which is the intersection of software engineering and security. Software engineering was the initial field, and then I combined it with security. I actually have an industrial engineering background, and I know this is a manufacturing summit. I actually worked at IBM before at NC State. I've been at NC State now 21 years, but I worked at IBM 9 years in manufacturing. So, you know, this cybersecurity manufacturing is kind of an intersection of my past. So primary research and teaching in software security. Some things just about myself. I was asked to be the department head, I don't know, back in 2015 or something like that. I'm interim, so not the full one, which ended up lasting 4 years. And I took that position. I really had never had any desire to be a department head. It's, you know, it's personal choice. But the reason, like primary reason I wanted to do it, or that I accepted to do it, was because there was this wall that leading to the department head office from when the department was created, now 50 years ago, and all the department heads since then. And it was a wall of white men. And I just thought I just needed my picture up there. That's why I wanted to do it. I wanted for people to walk down the hall and to know that it wasn't just white men. And so I looked to see, I mean, when I go back into the office after COVID is over, I'll take a picture of the wall because I wore a hot pink vest, or, you know, a hot pink jacket. So I'm up there, the only woman with a hot pink jacket. And so as soon as that was on the wall, I'm like, you know, I'm done with this. I don't need to do this anymore. And I didn't end up actually putting my name in when it came to be like the real department head. I was acting in interim for really a period of 4 years. But when it came time to do it, I chose not to do it. And it was a very hard decision, but you know, one thing that I think we all have to do is to go after our joy. And I love being a research professor and working with students and teaching. And I did not love being a department head. And so it was, you know, my choice at still wanting to lead women, but in a different way. And so, like, you know, since then I have become an ACM fellow and IEEE fellow, so the two primary societies. And I feel like that's how I'm leading. I'm leading to show that, you know, technical excellence is achievable. These are my children. Actually, the three behind me are my children. My son's girlfriend is the last one. Also to say, you know, a lot of people can have trouble with work-life balance. I have found, you know, if you really do, like I always put my kids first and manage the flexibility of my academic life, being able to do what I needed to do for them first. And it's, you know, you can ask me about that. As far as hobbies, my hobby was something that I now have created called the Vibrant Academic. And so what I found in COVID as I worked with my students is whenever I talked to a student, I felt like the first 15 minutes during COVID was to bring their spirits back up. Like, okay, let's get you back on track mentally, and then let's talk technical. And so what I did decide, and I have an interest in like holistic health and whatnot. And so what I decided on a dime was I'm going to create a 1-credit course for the PhD students in the computer science department to talk about meditation, sleep, eating right, nutrition, exercise, like, you know, and community and all kinds of the holistic aspect of it. And I felt like I was able to bring them back and get them to have a community and to be back on track. Anyway, so it was successful. I'll keep teaching it. And it was something that came out of COVID, because it was like, we need this, but I think it's needed in general. So I actually think I'll put a website together and put some videos on there. Last thing, I know I'm getting up against my 6 minutes, but a little story. My turning point in my diversity inclusion life was back when I worked at IBM. I was 26 years old, pregnant, and a manager, and they asked me to be on the Minority Recruiting Council, and I said sure. And so I had to walk through the manufacturing facility to the other side, and I got there, and I was in a room of 40-year-old African-American men, and I was the 26-year-old pregnant white girl. And I all of a sudden was like, I had as a manager, I had, I don't know, 15 people in my department. One was African-American. I didn't have a cell in my body that ever said like, oh, I have 14 white people in one. Like, there was nothing. I viewed him 100% the same. But when all of a sudden I was the minority, I was like, whoa, this is how it feels. Does Charles feel any different? Like, it was like change the whole thing around. And we were also talking about minority recruiting. So I was like, they're gonna think I have nothing to say about this. Everything I say, they're gonna think, why can you say anything? You don't know about this. And as the months went on, I was able to contribute and feel comfortable. And the pink teddy bear is because when I had that baby, those men sent me a teddy bear to the hospital. So it was a really nice thing, but it was a really life-changing experience for me. So that's my slide. I'm happy to talk about any of those things during the Q&A.
Thanks, Lori. That was amazing. I love that story of that meaningful connection.
Yeah.
And being aware of your identity. Like, some of the sessions I facilitate, sometimes we do this activity where we said, when did you first realize that you were different, or your identity was different than others? That's a perfect story. I might use that as an example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Perfect. AJ.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for having me today. Let me share my screen here. So I have on the left-hand side, this is a little bit about me. My hobby is helping to raise 4 kids under, well, the oldest just turned 6 2 weeks ago. So COVID has been the epitome of work-life balance while trying to get the oldest into kindergarten. Thomas and Evie are twins, so trying to get them through pre-K, and then had a baby in September of last year. So when I lead discussions on women and the unfortunate of millions of women leaving the workforce over the past year and a half, this is why I feel it every day. But I'm still here. So my history is I first started working for Marge Incorporated, so the candy company, and I actually worked for the vice president of chocolate, which everybody likes to hear. That's an actual title, or it was years ago. And it was very, it was great and exciting. We got to tour plants where they were making different types of chocolates, but I was specifically with R&D and specifically led our technology committee, which was a thought leadership committee on how we could embed new technologies and work with corporations, other corporations outside, on utilizing and improving technology for other issues outside of the plant. So for example, how are we going to improve clean water in Cote d'Ivoire, which obviously produces a lot of cacao. And so there's always these great connections, but a much bigger play. And because of that, I started to really get interested in what are these issues outside of the scope of our own company, our own organization, that we can make a direct impact on and have a larger end goal. From there, I came to the National Association of Manufacturers, and then over to the Manufacturing Institute, which is a nonprofit, as you said, workforce education partner of the NAM. I started leading the Step Ahead Awards when our president left in 2016. So I'd already been doing it for years, but she left and I got a call when the twins were 4 months old saying, we need you to come back now and lead this full time. And that was my decision point, is I had planned to go part-time at that instance where I had 3 kids under a year and a half, and decided that I need to set that example. I knew enough about women's empowerment and feminism that I wanted to prove that women can do it all. The Step Ahead Awards is our women's engagement activity. It's our largest event at the Manufacturing Institute. So at this point, we have 1,100 Step Ahead alumni, so women who have won an award. We do a leadership development training, but we're really getting the word out in a community that, as you said, Lori, it is completely male dominated. So it's 70% men. So women are the largest talent gap that we have in our industry. Also certified in emotional intelligence, which was a big change in my life and my role, is the importance of EQ versus IQ, and going into meetings with leaderships and saying, okay, what makes a great leader? Is it their experience? Is it their IQ? Or is it their ability to overcome? Is it courage? Is it kindness? And all those things that when you think about the perfect leader, it tends to slide towards their emotional intelligence. So from there, we all rolled that up into, and I know I'm hitting out of time too, but rolled that up into what we're doing at the Manufacturing Institute. And my D&I, my value for D&I and why I care so much about it. And that is the continuous learning. So all of these items that you see on the slide, the case studies, every month or multiple times a month, we do a roundtable on a D&I topic, as well as a glossary of terms. So when we went out and said, what can we do to be beneficial to you when it comes to the D&I space? A lot of the answers were, we need to know what these words are appropriate, what they mean, what's the context, the history, because it does change, language does adapt. And that was so eye-opening to see that the changes in just a short amount of time. And within 5 years, a word that everybody used actually was a terrible word. And we should consider instead using this because it is more inclusive and it better explains fill in the blank. So all that time together, it is now what I spend 95% of my time doing, is learning and teaching about the best practices that we've heard with D&I and trying to make the industry and the greater country more inclusive, including, and this is what you see a link to on the bottom, is what we call the Pledge for Action. And this was the culmination of the murder of George Floyd, as well as everything that we had been experiencing up until that point, which we as an industry need to move the needle. And so our Pledge for Action is asking manufacturers to do 2 things. One is commit to 50,000 tangible actions to improve and make more inclusive for underrepresented minorities. We do include women in that. And then 2 is to create 300,000 pathways for Black people and people of color, specifically in our industry. And the goal is by 2030, we will be reflective of the US as a whole. We're seeing a lot of success there. We're seeing a lot of movement. It's encouraging, and we'll keep going.
Amazing. I love seeing action related to D&I because it's so important. We talk so much about it and there's rarely ever any action moving forward. Thank you, AJ. Thanks for sharing that. And good luck with the 4 kids. I feel you. I only have 1, but good luck with that. All right, Fidelis, last but not least, and I know you've had a rough week. So tell us about yourself and your hobby and welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I do not have a slide. Yes, I'm still having a rough week, but we'll get through it like we always do. We go through COVID. We've gotten through a worse week, so we'll be fine. My name is Fidelis. My last name is pronounced without the first N, pronounced gang. And Heather, we share a few things in common. You said East Africa, I'm West. You were born in Europe, so was I, 18th district of Paris, but I was raised in Cameroon, West Africa. But I have traveled quite a bit in East, Kenya, Ethiopia, beautiful countries. And I spent a lot of time in Asia. I'm the Black Asian because Vietnam, China, Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong. I know better than most people you run into. And as a matter of fact, my bachelor's degree, I obtained my bachelor's degree in China, and I studied in Chinese. All of my classmates were Chinese back in the 80s. And so professionally, yes, let's talking about profession. My bachelor's degree is in civil engineering, a minor in computer science. That was in China. My master's degree is in agricultural engineering with a concentration on computer simulations. That was here in Texas, Texas A&M University. And my doctorate is in education. So I'm all over the place, confused individual, right? Profession, that's what it is. I can manage to express myself in about 5 different languages, English, some French, Chinese, some Spanish, and a little bit of Japanese. So yeah, and then I heard you talking about, I was listening to you, Heba, I'm like, whoa, and I heard what your hobby was and stuff for that. So talk about my COVID-19 hobby. I didn't have much of one. I found myself stuck at home. I just taken on this new position of being chair. So I came into chair in the virtual world, working from home. And I've one that's always prided myself with being able to distinguish between work and a personal life. And that was destroyed because my laptop was my office computer. My cell phone was my office phone. My house was my office. And I quickly found I didn't know when or how to distinguish between work and home. And it drove me crazy for a little bit. And I had to teach and retrain myself to ignore the sounds coming from my phone that were related to work, or that little ding you get on the laptop when an email comes in. I would turn the volume off and say, I'm going to watch TV for 30 minutes, no matter what, and do watch TV. It was crazy. I'm now in my office. I'm beginning to come on campus, and boy, I couldn't wait. So, and then this happened. My dean, like I mentioned, is gone. So a whole lot of stuff follow on us chairs. We're trying to, there's an interim, but he hasn't taken office yet. So we'll see what happens. But so my COVID hobby was revisiting some of the places, and there's a lot of places that I've been to around the world. So I use Google Maps and other maps, and I would just zoom down like to neighborhoods where I lived or traveled. And it was fun because it was in Africa, it was in Asia, Europe, South America, and some of the memories, right? Hong Kong, the park where I live, where I jog, where I played soccer with this middle-aged man, and it was a whole lot of fun. It was nice. And I just kept reminding myself, I cannot wait for the world to get back to quote unquote normal. So you, Heber, can go around, see the world and make those trips. I believe you mentioned Ghana, West Africa. You mentioned the Caribbean. Please go. There's a Chinese proverb. I guess it's in every language that in Chinese it goes, literal translations, you can read 1,000 books. It would not match the travel of 10 miles, something like that, meaning go out and travel. This theme here is about diversity. You're not going to learn about people and culture to the point where you have an understanding, to appreciate, and to be compassionate and be patient, to understand other people's perspective, culture, why they sound the way they sound, why they eat what they eat, and how you're not going to get that from a textbook. It's not going to happen in a classroom. One of the ways to get this world together is to travel, meet people. And don't be a tourist when you go to places. Get down, get on the street, meet these people, do the things they do. And all of a sudden, you're going to find yourself in conversation going, interesting, right? And be thinking, that's strange, that's weird, that's different. Different is good. Well, I don't know if different is good, but different is just different. Different never meant bad, it never meant good. It means, and different is from whose perspective? Yours? Different is you saying, I'm not familiar with that. But when is that bad, right? Open mind. I'm coming. I put myself in the stop clock so I don't pass 6 minutes. But personally, I mentioned that grew up in West Africa. To touch on the topic of diversity, I am a chair at the predominantly minority school, Houston Community College. It's a minority school, a lot of African Americans, a lot of Hispanics. We are number one, by the way, for international enrollments, the entire country. Houston Community College has been number one enrolling international students the past 15 years. I think we're up to about 12,000 now, international enrollments. So minority in every sense. We just revived a really important student club, Women in Technology. We have a young, faculty advisor that's dynamic, and I'm giving her all the support. It's under me, by the way. I'm giving all the support I can. And a bunch of our female students have jumped in. We're doing seminars. But so I look forward to this panel. I'm going to learn as much as I share, which is part of why I was excited to join the panel. But sorry, I didn't have a slide, but that's me.
It's all good. Your stories were amazing. I loved hearing about that. So when we go to Japan, I'm going to call you and be like, help me figure this all out, because you're the Black Asian, so you can help me with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Okay, let's jump into our conversation. So let's start with the business case for diversity. I think that's usually where the conversation around diversity and inclusion begins. And we've seen numerous studies and a bunch of different research show that D&I really helps fuel innovation, create engaged teams, and improve productivity. So if you were looking to persuade a skeptic of the benefits of a diverse workforce, what would be your go-to example? Like, I've heard a lot shared here already just in our opening stories, but how have you persuaded skeptics in your field and in your work? Lori, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I guess two examples, and they're more like engineering examples of why it's important to have a diverse perspective. One is the reason why, and hopefully they fixed it by now, that seatbelt or airbags would kill anyone under 12 is because all of the models were adults and males, I believe. And so they didn't like take a holistic perspective of all of the different types of people who could be sitting in the seat. And so, like, if there were, maybe if it was all men doing the engineering, then they're thinking about one way. But if they bring in a diverse perspective, the engineering would be broadened. And then the other one is, a classic, which is the facial recognition, having trouble with dark faces. And that's another case where the training data was not representative. And so therefore, the models weren't right. And so it just shows that, everything we need to be, just representative. Everything should be representative of the population as a whole. So like if from a business perspective, we're not respecting that, then we're not going to develop the right products, which, hurts business in the long run. Take Amazon and all the bad press they got about that facial recognition. I mean, they really it's the model, the data. And so, yeah.
Makes perfect sense. You're right. Yeah. Anyone else want to add to that? Examples that you've used?
Yeah, I will say in our industry, we have this huge, what we call the skills gap, right? We have open jobs where the latest report from Deloitte in the Institute is talking about 2 million open jobs by 2030. Everybody feels that. They all feel the crunch. So what we talk about when diversity inclusion is we say diversity is attracting the widest talent pool possible and inclusion is keeping it. So if you are not actively attracting women, you have cut your talent base in half. If you are not actively attracting racial and ethnic minorities, you're taking out another 20, 30%. So now your talent pool is 20, 25%. So when you talk about having open jobs, widen your talent pool. But I also think, to Lori's point, there is so much data out there. So when you talk about agility and lean and innovation, increase in ROE or an ROI, there's just such a plethora of hard factual data that the business case for D&I, it feels like it's less a business case because that is so obvious and so easily proven. And it's more about, you know, Laura, you told the story, like getting white men in a room where they are the minority so they can feel that. I'll tell one quick story. So I hosted a women's event with about 150 women, and it was sponsored by the CEO of a Forbes 100 company, a male, white male, shockingly. And he came to the meeting, and he's very, very supportive, very encouraging, and all of the right things that you want a leader to do. But he came to the meeting and he had a question, and he raised his hand and he said, I've had this question for an hour now, and I've been terrified to ask it because I'm sitting in this room and I'm the only guy. And that's why I feel like I should ask it, because this was, as supportive as I've been, that was his aha moment. And I do feel like we need more aha moments.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really great point. I think a large part of that too, we talked a lot as we were talking about how we engage with diversity and inclusion is how people feel, right? And usually the majority feel like they have no connection to diversity and inclusion. That's that problem. I'm not related to that, or I am the problem. And so, you know, I'm the reason they have diversity and inclusion programming because I am a straight white male, or I am of the majority. And so having those aha moments and the research beside it, I think is really helpful in connecting it to the individual. Fidelis, did you want to share a story? Any examples from your area?
Well, look, Grace Hopper, and I just caught a story on Grace Hopper on TV, on PBS, I believe. Look this up, Google, look about the computer bug, like bugging bug. It's an incredible story. If you do, I don't want to spoil it for you, just Google computer bug history. Awesome. And it was Grace Hopper. So I've used that with the women in technology at my college. I just keep 3 of her name. And the Grace Hopper conference, whatever they call it, is the largest gathering of women in technology. It's been to my city, Houston, twice. I managed to attend the first time. Let me tell you, if you're not registered 3 months ahead, you're not getting in. That's how popular it is, right? So that's one. But the thing about diversity, though, I think I call it common sense. You look at the world today. You look at you here, but you look at me, right? Just our background stories. So quick story, I go back to China still quite a bit. And a couple of years, about a decade ago, I ran into this American young lady. We walk out of the store together, an African American lady, and we start talking to each other. I'm like, what are you doing in Beijing? What are you doing in China? She said she was in law school. I'm like, law school in China? And she go, yeah. And I will go to talking, and I'm like, what a smart young lady, because this is about 15 years ago, I should say. She's told me, I figured with all these Western companies coming to China, the American, European, they're going to need to understand the Chinese legal system. But that was at a high level. But what I found once she told me that, and I was talking to people, is a lot of the Western companies, when I arrived China, they hired a culture interpreter, somebody that taught them about Chinese, Japanese culture, what you say at the dinner table, what you don't say, because you could torpedo a multi-billion-dollar deal with just a couple of, not doing the cheers correctly. And I can relate to that because I literally grew up in China. So diversity is this thing about knowing each other and being able to operate in an environment where we all fit and make everybody in the room feel comfortable. So it's common sense to me that companies, organizations, universities should be on this track, right? So.
Perfect. I agree with you. It is common sense. AJ, you talked about the problem statement with filling that talent pipeline. And you work with companies on their diversity and inclusion efforts. Can you talk more about how the industry and these companies are attracting and retaining underrepresented talent?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been a variety of things. Most, I would say, of our large manufacturers have spent an increased time and attention to social challenges, is what they would call them, and set specific goals usually tied to compensation is what we're starting to see now. And that really did change after June 2020. And I do want to, I've said that once, but the murder of George Floyd was, and for a variety of reasons, but was a critical tipping point, I think, in our national conversation. And therefore has encouraged and potentially forced a lot of companies, not just manufacturing, but across the spectrum, to be open about what they are doing to make a social change. So unconscious bias training is pretty common now in our industry. Courageous or crucial conversations are a base level D&I activity that we're seeing a lot doing. And that's, again, making sure that the things are being talked about that, like you said, we can bring in our full and true selves into work. We're seeing a lot of creation of specific D&I positions. We are seeing board increase, so diversity on their board or in the leadership teams. We are seeing a review of HR practices, and supplier diversity has become a huge issue right now with manufacturers. And then the last thing I also say is invisible diversity. So gender, race, ethnicity, or potentially religion sometimes are all visible diversity aspects, but you do have quite a number of what we call invisible diversity that we are seeing. Thankfully, a lot of manufacturers stand up and say this is important as well. So things like ability, sexual orientation, tentatively religion depending, geographic location, all of those kinds of secondary diversity aspects, we're seeing the importance and the inclusion of them in all activities and at all levels.
Perfect. And you mentioned the incidents of last year and the murder of George Floyd, and there have been a number of those types of movements that have increased awareness in the workplace around D&I. The Me Too movement as another example. How, I agree with you, that was a tipping point, but how have these movements affected your own workplaces, and kind of what impact or what things do you see helping move us forward after those incidents and really changing the culture of D&I and moving the industry forward around D&I? It's usually something that we have to be reactive to when something like that happens, but how are we now? I see a lot of companies and industries becoming more proactive, so setting up these foundations so they're better able to address as incidents pop up. So Lori, Fidelis, as you're looking at these movements that have come up, how have they shown up in your workplaces? How have they made an impactful change?
Yeah, I mean, I could go first. I know that when the George Floyd happened, I mean, there was, I feel like, when you're in the majority, you can be so naive. Like I thought, oh, but NC State is not, like, it's fine. We don't have any problems. It's a very nice, inclusive atmosphere. But the university and our department ran some surveys, and not necessarily so for all people. And so just raising the awareness and, like, what are those things that can make people feel uncomfortable? And like, I feel like, we haven't gone back to campus. So now it's a whole year later. And, being on this panel is good because I'll go back and say, hey, remember those things we talked about a year ago? Like, we're going to come back together again. And now we couldn't really address much when we're all at our houses. But now we get, to say, okay, what were some of those things that students felt uncomfortable with? And, it's a variety of types of things that have come up. I mean, George Floyd was one, but some issues that came up more recently, like I know as COVID was happening, so it was March of last year, I was working with a Chinese undergraduate student who canceled his spring break plans because he said, with COVID, as a Chinese person, he didn't feel safe because he thought people were so discriminatory against Chinese people. And then we did have a conversation recently about, India and all of the, new COVID cases in India, and that now people from India feel like they're being discriminated against and people are suspicious of them. Like, did you just come over and, as we go back in the fall. And so like there's an awareness both from Asians and, the attacks on Asians recently, and then Indian. So like, there's all kinds of dimensions of making sure that people feel welcome. And I do think our university does a good job. Like the leadership will send out like, inclusive messages, but that like it's the day-to-day and making sure that on a day-to-day basis that nothing's happening that's making people feel uncomfortable. But at least I feel like I'm in an environment where people are supportive of that and want to know and want to fix situations.
Well, George Floyd, our leadership does a good job. Again, we're a minority institution, really, practically. We're a big school too. There was a point, I think we talked about 85,000 enrollment, and that's a lot of students. It's a huge community. And I just, but then I got an invitation from Texas Tech, which is where I completed my doctorate. And they wanted me to join a panel at the university. They were trying to talk about, in the wake of George Floyd. And there was a lot of tears on that panel because there's the race issue in it and all that. But to me, what hit me hard was just the human aspect of it, right? And it's still tough for me to talk about that today. But in terms of what we did at my institution, I think they handled it pretty well. The chancellor jumped on it. The board got involved, and then I think there were a bunch of meetings and seminars and to try to talk to people. And I think that's really the way we need to look at it. Particularly for me as a teacher, as someone that walks into a classroom and address a classroom full of people, mostly young people with minds that can still be shaped. I made it a point, I don't tell anybody how to see the world, which is why I encourage the travel. You'd be amazed how a return from Peru or Brazil, how that affects the way you talk to or you interact with students from Latin America. Because if all you hear is the border, and there is an issue there, but it always hears how this illegal and coming and you can put things together. You're not wrong, but you're getting it's a single perspective to a very complex issue, right? So I like to use the word compassion. I think I threw it out way too much, but it doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from understanding. It comes from, if you don't know the other side, if you don't know the other person, you can't have that compassion because it's weird. You're looking at it going, why are you like this? Why are you not doing this? You don't understand, right? I think George Floyd, his situation, I think he brought that to this country to a certain extent. There was about a month or so, that I look across this country. Now there were people that were saying all this and like, well, why is the looting? Yes, the looting was a problem, but it got the most number of people, most number of Americans I've ever seen to look past the, determine like what is going on. How could this happen? How could this happen in a country? 10 minutes was it about? It's a long time to put your knee on anybody's neck, white or black or gray, I don't care, even a dog, and just stay there. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
I forgot I was on mute. We got a question that came in as a follow-up. How are you seeing accountability around D&I initiatives within companies, within your own companies? Are you seeing companies strictly enforcing policies on tolerance, creating new policies against discrimination, gender and racial inequities in the office? What are you seeing around that?
I will say we are, and I mentioned this briefly, we are seeing goals tied to compensation, which I will say is probably the easiest way to affect change. If your bonus is going to be affected on whether or not you are creating a more inclusive culture, you're going to actively work to create a more inclusive culture. we are seeing not only compensation goals tied to leadership, but we're seeing them publicly put out. So you can go, you can go to Pfizer's website, you can go to training, you can go and see they have set goals on what their diversity metrics will be in 5-10 years. And then there's obviously a lot of other pledges that are public, of course, the NAM Pledge for Action. But we're seeing mandated trainings and mandated regular trainings. We are seeing, in manufacturing, one of the struggles we have is production versus non-production, because production staff doesn't necessarily have computer or technology access. So we are seeing the viewing of live in-person trainings and discussions, the increase of ERGs, but I think it's the public statements and the public compensation that we are seeing is to increase the most accountability.
At MITRE, definitely our cultural attributes are around grace and respect, one of them. And so definitely making sure that managers and teams have the conversation about what grace and respect means. And I think that's only heightened since in the last year, and it's another way to stay accountable. I'm just being cognizant of time here. One question that came from the group is, after listening to the discussions and hearing the different types of diversities and inclusion, can anyone talk a little bit about those with disabilities and how they're usually the group that's most under-engaged, under-focused on, left out of the equation around diversity and inclusion? I know at MITRE, our employee resource councils, we have an accessibility council that really functions as a business council and works across the organization to ensure, that our documents, our website are accessible, that as we're recruiting and hiring, that we're offering accommodations or asking for them. So they're a really active council and a part of our kind of I&D structure. So that's one way at MITRE, but if anyone has some examples to share around those with disabilities as a diverse community.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I feel like similar, like a lot of support for accommodations and restrictions on websites, like, it has to be accessible. But from a computer science standpoint, we've had a number, like 2 blind students and accommodating. And one of the faculty members in our department actually 2 of them got so interested, it became their research topic, except, blind students in computer science. And one of the 2, she was an instructor, but she was getting her PhD, and she ended up getting her PhD in how to support blind students in computer science. So, culturally, I feel like, there's lots of the accommodations and accessibility are high priorities.
Also, Ed, so, I'll answer this. I see the chat too. I was writing up an answer, but there's 2 different types of, we call it ability. So when I said earlier, we typically don't use disability, we use ability because it's just different kind of ability. But there's 2 different kinds, and one is neuro and the other is physical. And so what we're seeing is them being integrated in those separate ways because they're different, to Lori's point, they're different accommodations. So for example, we just did a case study and roundtable on neuro abilities in April for Autism Awareness Month. And the accommodations there aren't heavy, if you will. So it is important, especially in our industry where those with autism specifically are great talent for our production roles, and encouraging them off, just those sorts of like seeing the success and the talent that we are utilizing and then spreading that awareness. Physical disability is difficult in our industry specifically because we already have such a high, it's manufacturing, so you already have a very specific, very mandated, very, OSHA safe roles and responsibilities. So we are seeing some success, and actually in July, we'll be highlighting a roundtable specifically on physical abilities and the amazing things that we've seen manufacturers do in that space as well.
Yes, Heba, I was gonna jump in and say, I think from an industry point of view, we've done a lot. The industry has done a lot to accommodate everyone. If you look at the typical software and application that comes out of the or hardware, they've all kind of ways, whether it's voice recognition or magnifier, starting from when you could configure your mouse to be left click and all that stuff. But I think those of us, particularly in higher education or in these places, we need to keep pushing the industry to be more accommodating. Yes, we've done a lot, but still a lot more can be done. So that's all I have to add to that. We've done a lot, not enough yet. We can keep doing. We can do a lot more to help people. And AJ put it right. I'm no expert in that area, the physical and but whichever form of ability, right? Special ability, we need to accommodate more and more. I agree.
Perfect. I love how you talked about that. Like, we've done a lot, but we do need to do more. And I feel like D&I is this journey, right? It's not like we get to a destination. We're always striving to become better. And D&I is the way that we do that, the vehicle in which we move. So looking at the time really quickly, collective impact is the practice of bringing stakeholders together in a structured way to achieve social change. And all three of you mentioned how you've seen problems and reached out and engaged with others to kind of help. AJ, specifically in your role, you're working across industry around the discussion around D&I, but can you talk a little bit more how you engage with partners outside of your specific scope to create a more inclusive and diverse workforce? And this question can go to anybody.
Yeah, I am not an SME. I mean, that's really the biggest and best way, right? As you could see me bumble over the last question, I'm not an expert in physical abilities. I'm also not an expert in autism. Like, I'm learning and partnering with Autism Speaks, partnering with Best Buddies, partnering with these other organizations that are experts. And I would argue that no D&I professional is an expert in all of it, because there's just so much information in it, as well as everybody has such an individualized, unique experience that I can't and don't want to claim that I know what it feels like for Fidelis or for Lori or for you in their own lives. Everybody's different. I think the other thing to do is partnering with where your gaps are. So if you are a smaller university or company or company and you don't have the ability to implement unconscious bias training, partner with someone who has the ability to do it right. And that's what we've been doing, and we found great success, and we're seeing across the board a lot of success there as well.
Yeah, I guess what I would say, like, I really want to resonate with, I think it was Fidelis. Someone just said there's more to do. I think it was Fidelis. There's always more to do. But I feel like in my time, in the years I've been a faculty member for 21 years, and I feel like that whole time, there has been an acknowledgement of the underrepresentation of African American and women, and like, it's still a problem. It really is still a problem. But Fidelis talked about the Grace Hopper conference, which you can't get a hotel. Like, you have people to register for that conference. They literally wait until 12:01 on the day you can register to get registered. And then there's also a TAPIA conference. I just looked it up. So TAPIA conference is for celebration of diversity in computing. And that happens every year as well. So like, I feel like there has always in all 21 years been an effort. We in the industry, not just our department. So we did have, until 1 year ago, we had the most female faculty members in a computer science in the country. In an engineering, so you can be computer science, not in an engineering department, but if you were in an engineering, we were the number 1. So like, there has been a focus, and if you have a candidate that is in an underrepresented group for faculty member, like, the university would always work out to get that person to come. So of course there's always more to do, and it is those personal, like, do you feel welcome? Because even though there can be institutional support for these efforts, you know, every person needs to feel welcome. And so, you know, that's where I feel like maybe we could do a better job, because that was what George Floyd brought up. You know, I was like, oh, well, NC State's great. And then that's not really the experience some people are having. And so, you know, we need to get to understanding like what causes that. But anyway, you know, you're saying reach out beyond. I feel like from reaching out, you know, there's a lot of explicit efforts for D&I.
Laurie, I want to quickly say, Grace Harper, we're mighty proud of your institution. And thanks to leaders like you, you're not shy. Put up that picture back over there, that hot pink dress. Let it stay up. Let it stay up there. So
Thanks.
Perfect. And I know we have about 3 minutes. A question came in through the group that I just want to quickly answer, and I think it'll be a great tie to how we end this. But the question is, I'm a Black man and previously thought I knew enough about diversity and inclusion efforts at my company and university. Can you speak to ways that those of us from underrepresented communities can avoid feelings of complacency? And I'm a D&I practitioner, and so I always feel like I am a part of the solution. But even so, I get so overwhelmed with how little impact I really am able to create. And I have to remember, I don't know everything. I can't do everything, and I can't fix the world, right? These problems have taken decades, centuries to accumulate and be at the state they are. They're going to take a while for us to fix. And my point of advice would be any incremental success, any small action, even in the meaningful conversations, how Fidelis talked about that you're having one-on-one with a person, consider that a win and consider that impactful. And these little incremental changes and steps really do amount to bigger ripples in the D&I journey. And so with that, I wanted to just give everyone a quick 30 seconds to say just one thing you would give, one piece of advice before we close out around what would you want attendees to take back to their group to implement or to do or to think about as they're engaging on D&I. So really quickly, Fidelis, we'll start with you. One piece of advice.
yes, one piece of advice engaging D&I would be bold. Be bold, be polite, be nice, you know, but be bold. You know, don't be shy. It's nobody is better than you, but based on skin color, religion, height. No, so get that out of your mind. Be bold, be confident. I think that will work great for you. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I
Lori?
could go next. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, like, I guess your story, just, you know, or what you just said last, Hiba, resonated with me. Made me think about, I always use this practice called pair programming, which is two people working together at one computer to do their work. And I assign the pairs. And a number of years ago, the class I was teaching is a junior level. So this student had been in the program for 3 years. And this was a young African-American female who came up to me at the end of the semester. And she said, thank you so much. She said, you know, by making her work with other people, she actually met other people. And she said, I didn't know anyone in any of my classes until now. And so it's kind of at the individual, like, what can you do to actually pair people up, you know, like break the barriers, because everyone likes to go near people like them. But if they're forced to be in a situation where they're with other people, then it can break things down, you know, and that I hope that the rest of that young girl's college experience changed because of that. And so, you know, I think it is just create the situations to break people out of staying with people like them.
Thank you. AJ?
I would just say be okay being uncomfortable. Everybody makes mistakes, you will say the wrong thing, you will look the wrong way, and that's okay. Just keep trying, don't give up, keep going. Just keep being okay, knowing that there isn't a perfect answer.
Perfect, perfect. And thank you, AJ, Lori, and Fidelis for being on this panel. I agree with you. I learned a lot that I will take back, and I've enjoyed getting to know you all. Thank you to the organizers, Professor Gupta, Professor Carey, Gary Mack, and Hammond Pierce. Thank you to the National Science Foundation and the NYU Center for Cybersecurity. Please remember the next panel on the topic of securing IP and supply chain on July 1st. The link to this recording will be posted on YouTube, so you'll be able to share with your colleagues. Again, thank you everyone for having us here and for joining us today. Take care.
Yeah, but thank you.